A smoked sausage cooked low and slow is a beautiful thing when done right. The end result is a gorgeous looking sausage that's juicy, snappy, and extremely delicious. But when does cooking a sausage low and slow become dangerous? And more importantly, when should you be adding curing salts to your recipe to keep it safe? Thank you for joining us on another episode of Beyond the Recipe, where we take you behind the scenes and talk about the finer points of sausage making to help you level up your sausage game. Let's begin by understanding why cooking sausages in a smoker at low temperatures can potentially be dangerous. Sausages are basically meat and fat that's been ground mixed with spices. And through this process of mixing and grinding, you're introducing all types of bacteria to your meat, both good and bad. Have you ever heard of the phrase, life begins at 40? This refers to bacteria, because bacteria starts to get very active between the temperatures of 40 Fahrenheit and 140 Fahrenheit. And it's this temperature range that we call the danger zone. And when it comes to food safety, raw meat should never be left in the danger zone for more than 2 hours. So the longer your meat stays in the danger zone, the more likely you are to create a product that can potentially make you sick, which is where curing salts come in. Curing salts are added to sausages or recipes in general because they inhibit the growth of these unwanted pathogens. When you add curing salt to your recipe, you can keep your meat in the danger zone for much longer without having to worry about this harmful contamination. But not everybody wants to add curing salts to every sausage that they make. And so what we're going to do today is a bit of a food experiment. We're going to determine what's the lowest possible temperature you could smoke your sausages at and still have a safe product. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We just made a fresh batch of Texas hot links, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and separate these. We're just going to get these individual, and we're going to cook these at different temperatures. I'm going to cook this batch at 150 Fahrenheit, this one at 160, this one at 180, and if we need to, we'll cook this one at 190. So the goal for this experiment is to try to get our meat past 140 Fahrenheit in under 2 hours. There's a lot of different ways we could have run this experiment, but what we're going to end up doing is cooking these sausages in our digital smokers from Smokin' It. These digital smokers give us incredibly accurate temperatures within 1 or 2 degrees of what we set it at, which is going to give us very precise results. If you're going to try to run this experiment at home, and I highly suggest that you do, but you don't have a digital smoker, let's say you have an offset or a barbecue pit, know that it is incredibly difficult to maintain these very low consistent temperatures, primarily because there is a heat source that's always on. And so just be aware of that. You're more than likely going to cook a little bit hotter than what your target is, but I hope you get a chance to try this. All right, now that we've got the equipment out of the way, let's talk about the process. When you make a smoked sausage, you should always dry your sausage first before smoking. That's going to improve the texture, the color, the snappiness. You're going to have an overall better experience and produce a high quality smoked sausage if you dry it first. And there's a couple different ways you could dry your sausage. The easiest is to just place it on a rack at room temperature and let it dry naturally. Now, this process can take anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on how breezy the room is that your sausage is drying. You could speed that process up by putting a fan in front of it, and you could reduce that time to about half an hour. The other option to dry your sausage if you have a digital smoker is to place your sausages in your smoker, set the temperature to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and leave the door open, and this will evaporate any condensation that's built on your sausage, getting it ready to smoke. Either way works fine. Today, we're going to be drying our sausage by putting a fan in front of it so that we can speed up the process. It is important to remember that your drying time has to be calculated into your danger zone time. So today's goal is to get the temperature of our sausage outside of the danger zone in less than 2 hours. So if it takes me 30 minutes to dry my sausage, we've got to get it out of the danger zone in an hour and a half. The last thing I had to consider for this experiment was temperature. Normally, we're not preheating our digital smoker. We're putting our meat in there while it's cold. We're turning it on, setting the temperature, and walking away. But that's not the case if you're using a barbecue pit or an offset. You've got to prepare the coals, get it to the right temperature, and once you hit your target, you're adding your meat. So for this experiment, we are going to be doing just that. We're going to be preheating our digital to the appropriate temperatures, and then we're going to add our meat. I think following these parameters for this experiment is going to paint a very interesting picture as to when you should use curing salts or when you don't have to use curing salts when smoking meat. Let's get started. Here's our sausage. They have been drying at room temperature in front of a fan for about 30 minutes. The internal temperature of the sausage is 61 degrees
Fahrenheit, and our smoker is set to 150 degrees. And now we're going to cook our sausage for 90 minutes, because remember, we want to get the temperature of the sausage outside of the danger zone in under 2 hours. 90 minutes have passed, and this is what it looks like. This is a very popular temperature to smoke sausages. It cooks them low and slow, and you get an absolutely beautiful product. Let's see what the temperature is after 90 minutes. We are at 114 F. So when you combine drying and cooking time, we are 2 hours in the danger zone, which means it is not safe to smoke sausages at 150 Fahrenheit without curing salts. Let's go ahead and move on to the next temperature at 160 degrees. Our sausage has been drying for 30 minutes. It's got an internal of 56 Fahrenheit. We're going to go ahead and pop these into the smoker for 90 minutes and see what that looks like. 90 minutes have passed, and let's give this a temperature poke and see where we're at. Okay, so for round number 2, we are at 122 degrees Fahrenheit, a combined total of 2 hours, still in the danger zone. Let's check this other sausage. 124. Yeah, so we still got a little ways to go before we get to that 140 mark. And so when it comes to cooking your sausage at 160 degrees Fahrenheit, it is not a good idea to do it without curing salts. All right, let's take a look at round number 3. We're now at 170 F. We're going to do the exact same thing. These are my sausages, 30 minutes in front of a fan, and they are dry to the touch. Looks like the internal temperature is about 53 F. Okay, so you know the drill. We're going to pop them in the smoker. They're going to cook for the remainder of that 2-hour window, which is 90 minutes. And here it goes. 90 minutes later, let's give them a quick temperature check and see where we're at. First one is 100. Come on, baby. 132, 133 degrees Fahrenheit. Not quite there yet. We are 2 hours in the danger zone. Let's check this other sausage. Same thing, 133, 134. We are getting close, but we are not there yet. So being that we are still in the danger zone, if you're going to be smoking at 170, you should consider using curing salts. Let's move on to the next test, 180 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so we're going to be smoking these babies at 180 F. There's our sausages. They're dry to the touch. 30 minutes in front of a fan. We have an internal of 58 F. Into the smoker for 90 minutes, and 90 minutes have passed. So let's go ahead and see what the temperature reading is. We've been cooking at 180 F for 90 minutes, and here we go. I'm feeling good about this one. Here we go. 141, 142. There we go. So we are out of the danger zone, but barely. Wow, a little too close in my book. Notice it took every bit of those 2 hours to get out of the danger zone. Let's take a look at the next test. This is going to be at 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Sausage is dry to the touch. Internal temperature looks average, 57 F. We're going to smoke these for 90 minutes at 190. And I actually checked these a little sooner. So now 75 minutes have passed. Let's give these a quick temperature reading. And it looks like we are 140 degrees at 75 minutes. So a total elapsed time was 1 hour and 45 minutes in the danger zone. Much better temperature right here if you're not going to be using curing salts. Let's do our final test, 200 degrees Fahrenheit. We got sausages that are dry to the touch, 30 minutes at room temperature, 54 internal temperature when we put them in the smoker. And for this last round, I think we're going to check them even sooner. We're going to check them at 1 hour. So 60 minutes later, let's see what the temperature reading is. Now we're cooking at 200 F. And here we go. It looks like we are well within the safe zone for these sausages. We've spent a combined total, both drying and cooking, 1.5 hours in the danger zone, and that is completely acceptable. A lot of information to extrapolate here. Let's talk about it.
Before we talk about what we just learned, let's take a look at a recent poll that we had on our channel. The question that was submitted was, what's the lowest temperature you could smoke a sausage before you need to add curing salts? And the most popular option at 38% of the votes was 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Interestingly enough, the least popular option, with only 10% of the votes, was 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I did have an opportunity to talk to some of you who submitted votes, and I just asked what made you choose what you chose. And for those of you who submitted 150, at least those that I talked to, the two most common answers that I got was, number one, I watch another YouTube channel and they said it's okay. And number two, because the danger zone is between 40 and 140 and we're cooking outside the danger zone at 150, it's okay as well. You got to remember, when we're talking about the danger zone, we're talking about the internal temperature of the meat. That's the most important number that you got to be aware of when it comes to food safety and when it comes to determining whether or not you're going to put curing salts inside your recipe. As far as getting information from YouTube, that's a tricky topic because there are some content creators that are true pros that have been doing this a long time, incredible resource for charcuterie. But at the same time, there are some YouTube channels that honestly are just getting started in the craft and have no business teaching it. So hopefully this information that we're giving you right now will help you discern which is which. And at the end of the day, my best advice is take the information that you get off of YouTube with a grain of salt, do your own research, and make sure that you're doing it properly. So let's talk about today's results. I'm going to be the first to say that the amount of variables for this experiment was quite honestly overwhelming. Do you dry your sausage? Do you not? If you do dry it, how long do you let it dry for? What's the temperature of your sausage before it goes into the smoker? How about the diameter? Because that does make a difference. Also, how much sausage are you cooking at one time? 3 links like we did? Or are you cooking 30 pounds? All of those things play a huge part in how your smoker operates, heats up, and the internal temperature of your meat. The hope here is to keep it super simple so that you can have a general idea of what we're talking about and a better understanding as to when you might want to add curing salts versus when you might want to leave them out. Okay, let's talk about the results. In every test, we dried our sausages for 30 minutes, as you saw in the video, and then we cooked for 90 minutes because the goal was to get the internal temperature of the meat outside the danger zone in under 2 hours, basically. Our first test at 150 degrees Fahrenheit, 30 minutes of drying and 90 minutes of cooking gave us an internal temperature of 114 F. That's 2 full hours in the danger zone. At 160, same parameters, our final temperature of the meat was 125 Fahrenheit, and at 170, the final temperature of the meat was 132 Fahrenheit. So all 3 of those temperatures did not produce a sausage with an internal temperature that got us outside of the danger zone. Remember that, 150, 160, and 170. After 2 full hours, we were still in the danger zone, not a good place to be. At 180, same parameters, the internal temperature of our sausage was 142, and that right there breaks that danger zone barrier. Now, I am cautious to recommend 180 as kind of like the standard for cooking your sausage without curing salts because there are so many different variables. The thickness of the sausage, how long you let it dry. You know, if you let it dry for an hour instead of 30 minutes, that number is certainly going to change. But let's move on to the next one. At 190 degrees cooking temperature, we let it dry for 30 minutes, but we only cooked it for an hour and 15 minutes. So 15 minutes less than all the other temperatures, and we had already reached the target of 141 degrees Fahrenheit. So it looks like we're getting out of the danger zone a lot quicker, which is what your goal is if you're not going to be using curing salts. Finally, at 200 degrees Fahrenheit, 30 minutes of drying, 1 hour of cooking, and we got to an internal temperature of 143. So what does all that mean? Well, what's most important here is that hopefully you have a better understanding of how temperature and time relate to the safety of food and how important it is to get outside of that danger zone in a reasonable amount of time, especially if you're not going to be using curing salts. Unfortunately, because of the amount of variables that exist in this particular setting, it's very difficult to give a precise answer as to when you should versus when you shouldn't use curing salts. I can say this, based off of the results that we got here today, if you're going to be smoking your sausage at 150, 160, or 170 degrees Fahrenheit, or if you're at least going to be starting your sausage off at those temperatures, I would advise the use of curing salts. When it comes to the hotter temperatures, like 180, 190, even 200 Fahrenheit, a lot of that is going to depend on the type of sausage you're making, you know, the diameter of the sausage, how long you let it rest, how much of it you're making, the type of smoker you have, the temperature of the sausage going into the smoker. So there's a lot of factors that play. Personally speaking, the 180 and 190 cooking temperatures were cutting it a little too close for me. I mean, we were getting out of the danger zone, but without a whole lot of wiggle room. And with there being so many variables at play, I wouldn't feel confident recommending either one of those temperatures. I like the 200 Fahrenheit cooking temp because it got us out of the danger zone in only 60 minutes, which gives us plenty of time to dry our sausage and then smoke. Overall, my opinion on the matter is this. If you don't want to put curing salts in your smoked sausage, I would recommend you cooking those sausage at a temperature of at least 200 Fahrenheit or hotter. 225 is actually a little bit better. Anything lower than those temperatures, I would seriously consider putting curing salts into the recipe so you don't get anyone sick. Thanks a lot for watching this video. If you got any questions, thoughts, or concerns, leave them in the comment section below. And if you got anything out of this video, a thumbs up is always helpful. If you're new to sausage making, be sure to click that subscribe button and that notification bell, because we've got an entire series of videos that'll take you beyond the recipe that's guaranteed to level up your sausage game. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.